Drop the weapon! The HOA guy's voice cracked like a whip through the warm air. He had his gun pointed straight at my son's chest. It happened so fast. 1 minute, we were just finishing up some yard work outside the house. The next, this middle-aged man with a potbelly and tactical sunglasses was in our driveway, aiming a Glock with both hands like he was in a movie. My son, Jonah, didn't flinch, didn't move an inch, didn't even blink. He slowly raised both hands, not fast, just enough to keep things from spiraling into something permanent. The sun caught a glint of metal from under Jonah's flannel shirt. The HOA guy didn't seem to notice. But I did, because I knew what was under that shirt. The man yelling at him had no clue who he was pointing that gun at. No clue that the quiet, polite man standing before him wasn't just some 24-year-old homeowner. No clue he'd served 2 tours and could disarm him in less than 3 seconds if he wanted. And worst of all, he had no clue that Jonah was armed to the teeth. That's when it happened. Let me take you back to how all this started. We moved into the neighborhood 6 months ago. My name's Rebecca, single mom, widow, nurse. After my husband died in an accident 4 years ago, it was just me and Jonah. We'd been living in a small, quiet apartment near the hospital where I worked nights. When Jonah got out of the service, he didn't talk much. Didn't sleep much either. He didn't come back the same. He was still my sweet boy, still helped me with groceries, still kissed my cheek in the mornings. But something about him was steel. Like life had carved him into something stronger and colder. When he suggested we buy a house together, I almost cried. He said it'd be good for me to have space, a garden, maybe a front porch swing. Said he'd feel better knowing I was somewhere safer. We chose this quiet HOA neighborhood outside Charlotte because it was peaceful. Well-trimmed lawns, smiling neighbors, a private lake just a mile down the road. At least on paper, it was supposed to be a dream. I should have known it was too perfect. Because when an HOA tells you we take security seriously, what they really mean is we're bored, entitled, and a little bit dangerous. The first couple months weren't bad. We met some nice folks. There was Mrs. Green, who always gave me fresh tomatoes from her garden. A teenager named Wyatt, who mowed lawns in the summer to save up for his first car. But there was one man who rubbed us the wrong way from day one. His name was Dennis. He was the HOA vice president, but really he thought he was sheriff. He carried himself with the kind of authority no one gave him, wore military-style boots, even though he'd never served. Always had a Bluetooth earpiece in like he was on some secret call. Dennis had a habit of walking up and down the street at random hours, not just walking, patrolling. Once, I saw him crouch behind someone's trash bin because a teen was riding a bike with neon tires. He kept a clipboard, wrote people up for tiny things. Jonah left the trash can out 5 minutes too long one morning. $50 fine. Our front bush was 3 inches taller than regulation. Warning. I hung my scrubs out to dry once. Violation. We paid, we trimmed, we smiled through our teeth. Jonah said not to cause waves. He's not worth it, Mom, he'd say. And I believed him. Until last week. Jonah had started building a little workbench in the garage. Said he wanted to take up woodworking, maybe make me a spice rack. It helped him stay focused, and I loved hearing the gentle buzz of his tools in the evenings. That same week, Dennis started parking across from our house more often. Not in a neighborly way. Just watching. Jonah noticed first. He keeps looking into the garage, he said. Maybe he's curious, I offered. No, that man's looking for a problem to start. I asked Jonah if he wanted me to say something. He shook his head and smiled. You say something, Mom, he'll just find a way to twist it. Let him watch. I don't build anything illegal. I left it alone. Until Thursday. That was the day Jonah got a package. A long, sealed box with no branding. He carried it into the garage and shut the door. I didn't think twice. Jonah still had some of his gear from the army. Tools, protective gear. Heck, even a couple of training rifles he used for drills. But someone else did think twice. A neighbor named Kenny, who was always too nosy for his own good, walked by when the box arrived. He told Dennis he thought Jonah might be building something dangerous. You see where this is going? Dennis didn't wait, didn't ask. He called in a personal check. In his HOA brain, that meant grab a gun and storm over like you're taking down a cartel. The next afternoon, Jonah was working on his bench again. I was in the backyard pulling weeds, birds chirping, kids laughing a few houses down. That's when I heard the tires screech. Dennis's SUV slammed to a stop in front of our house. He got out, fast, gun drawn, no uniform, no badge, just shouting, "Step away from the garage! Hands up! I said hands up!" By the time I ran around to the front, Jonah was standing calmly in the driveway, arms raised. Dennis had the barrel locked on him, finger twitching on the trigger. Jonah's face didn't show fear, just stillness. And then, Jonah moved. He moved in a way I hadn't seen since his last deployment ceremony. Not fast, not slow. Just enough. Dennis didn't see the shift in stance, didn't notice the way Jonah's weight pressed into the balls of his feet, ready for anything. What happened next is the part I still can't believe, because Jonah said just 3 words, quietly, and Dennis went pale. But before I could even process it, a black sedan turned the corner fast, real fast, too fast for a regular car, and out of it stepped someone who knew exactly who Jonah was, and they were not happy. The sedan door slammed. Out stepped a tall, clean-cut man in a gray suit with aviator sunglasses and a badge clipped to his belt. He didn't yell. He didn't rush. He just walked with the kind of authority that made everything stop. The kids riding bikes on the sidewalk skidded to a halt. A dog down the street stopped barking. The man raised his hand toward Jonah. "Staff Sergeant Turner," he said, calm as a Sunday sermon. Jonah lowered his arms, slowly, and gave a single nod. Dennis, still gripping the gun with both hands, looked confused. His grip faltered. His mouth opened to say something, but the man in the suit was already walking past him like he wasn't even there. "Put the weapon down," the suit ordered Dennis without looking at him. Dennis laughed nervously. "Who the hell are you?" The man didn't flinch. "You're pointing a firearm at a decorated combat veteran on private property with no just cause. You're lucky I'm not calling this in as a felony assault." Dennis blinked. "This is HOA business." "No," the man said flatly. "This is federal jurisdiction now." That was the moment the whole street started to gather. One by one, neighbors crept out of their homes. They didn't shout. They didn't ask questions. They just stood there, eyes wide, as everything unfolded. I stepped forward, heart pounding. "Jonah, what's going on?" He looked at me with eyes softer than I expected. "That's Agent Ryland," he said. "We work together." "On what?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. Jonah didn't answer, but Ryland did. He was part of an elite unit in the Middle East, embedded missions, urban recon. You name it, he's done it. Dennis scoffed, trying to regain control. "So what? That don't mean he's above the rules." Ryland turned to him then, completely, and pulled out his badge. "FBI, that enough authority for you, pal?" Dennis went silent. "Now," Ryland said, stepping between the 2 men, "you're going to hand over that firearm, go sit in your vehicle, and wait. Someone will be contacting your HOA board shortly." I had never seen anyone comply so quickly. Dennis's hands shook as he lowered the gun and handed it over. He walked back to his SUV with his eyes to the ground like a kid caught stealing candy. The tension snapped, and a breath I didn't know I'd been holding slipped out of me. Ryland turned to Jonah. "You okay?" Jonah nodded once. "Fine." Ryland looked at me. "You must be his mom. He talks about you like you're royalty." I smiled, still dazed. "Thank you. For whatever that was." He nodded. "You've got a good son." The crowd started to break apart. Some neighbors looked embarrassed. others curious. A few walked over and quietly apologized for not stepping in sooner. That night, Jonah barely said a word. We ate dinner in silence, and he went straight to his room afterward. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how close it all came. How one bad decision from a man with a fake badge and a real gun could have taken my son from me. The next morning, a letter was taped to our door. An official HOA violation. Subject: unauthorized possession of dangerous equipment. They were still trying to spin it like Jonah was in the wrong. I stormed over to the HOA office. It was a small brick building tucked between the tennis courts and the community center. I didn't knock. I marched in, letter in hand. Sitting behind the desk was a woman in her late 50s, Ms. Ellen Thompson, the actual president of the HOA. I'd only seen her once at the welcome barbecue. She'd seemed kind, if a little too formal. She looked up from her laptop and smiled faintly. "Mrs. Turner, I heard there was some excitement yesterday." I dropped the letter on her desk. "Is this a joke?" She picked it up, scanned it, then sighed. "Dennis again?" "You think?" I snapped. She folded the paper, set it aside. "I'll handle it." "That's not enough," I said. "He pulled a gun on my son. If your HOA has any kind of integrity, you'd remove him, today." Her smile vanished. "He's already been suspended, effective immediately." I blinked. "What?" "Dennis is, well, he's always been overzealous," she admitted. "But this crossed a line." I stared at her. For the first time, she looked genuinely regretful. "I'll also be issuing a formal apology at the next HOA meeting," she added. I wasn't sure if that was enough, but it was something. I left the office unsure how to feel. On one hand, Dennis had finally been reined in. On the other, Jonah was still quiet, withdrawn. Something had shifted. That evening, while I was watering the garden, Jonah came out and sat on the porch steps. "Ryland didn't just show up by coincidence," he said. I paused. "What do you mean?" "I called him," Jonah said, eyes on the sky. "When I saw Dennis circling the house all week, I had a feeling something was coming. Ryland owed me a favor." I walked over and sat beside him. "That's not something you should have had to deal with." Jonah shrugged. "I've dealt with worse." We sat in silence, the sky turning soft orange. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel normal again," he said quietly. "Not just here. Anywhere." I put my hand on his. "Normal's overrated." He cracked a tiny smile. The next few days were calm. People waved at us more. Dennis's SUV disappeared. The air felt lighter. But on Saturday morning, Jonah opened the mailbox and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo, a zoomed-in image of our garage. On the back, in thick red ink, were 4 words: "We're not done yet." Jonah's jaw clenched, and I knew this wasn't over. Jonah stared at the photo for a full minute before speaking. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear but from restraint. He turned it over again, studying the red scrawl like he was decoding a puzzle. I stepped closer. "What does it mean?" I asked, my voice shaky. He folded the photo in half and looked me in the eye. "It means someone's watching, and it's not Dennis." That was the part that sent a chill down my spine. Because as bad as Dennis was, he was loud and sloppy. This felt calculated. We took the envelope inside and laid it out on the kitchen table. Jonah pulled out a small flashlight and scanned the paper for fingerprints or signs of tampering. I stood back, letting him work. This was his world. I could handle stitches and broken bones, but this kind of threat? This was his battlefield. After a while, he leaned back in the chair and exhaled slowly. No prints. Whoever did this wore gloves. The envelope's standard. Inks from a thick marker, probably Sharpie. Photo was taken from a high angle. I'd guess from one of the roofs across the street. "You think it was a drone?" I asked. He nodded. "Could be. or someone's attic window. Either way, they were close. That night, Jonah didn't sleep. He sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the street through the blinds like a hawk. Every time I peeked in, he was still there, silent, alert. The only movement was his thumb grazing the grip of something holstered at his waist. The next day, Jonah made a call to Ryland. He said he'll look into it, Jonah told me afterward. But there's not much they can do unless something physical happens. A photo in your mailbox doesn't count as assault. Then what does? I asked bitterly. Do they have to break in before the law cares? Jonah didn't answer. He was already deep in thought, scanning the street like he could see things the rest of us couldn't. We went about our routines that week, but something had shifted. Every time the wind knocked a tree branch against the house, I jumped. Jonah installed a new security system, added floodlights, even set up cameras around the property, high-def, motion-activated, full coverage. Still, the sense of unease hung in the air like smoke. On Thursday, a small group of neighbors invited us to a backyard potluck. I didn't want to go at first, but Jonah insisted. We need to show face, let them know we're not scared. So we went. It was nice at first. Paper plates, lawn chairs, kids chasing each other through sprinklers. Mr. Halstead brought his famous ribs, and someone passed around a cooler full of sweet tea. For a moment, things felt normal again. A woman named Denise, who lived 3 houses down, sat beside me and leaned in. I heard about what happened with Dennis, she whispered. He's been a problem for years. You're not the first he's tried to intimidate. I nodded, unsure what to say. She lowered her voice further. But there's more going on around here than most people know. And not just with Dennis. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? She glanced around, then pulled her phone from her pocket. After a quick scroll, she held it up. It was a photo, grainy but clear enough. It showed a black SUV parked 2 blocks down. Same make and model as Dennis's, but different plates, tinted windows. Same kind that had circled our house last week. That car's been following different people on the block, she said. Not just you, me, the Halsteads, even that teenager Wyatt. Why? I asked. No one knows, she replied. But people are scared to speak up. Everyone thinks if they stay quiet, it won't come for them. I was about to ask more when Jonah appeared behind me, a plate of ribs in one hand. We need to go, he said, eyes flat. What's wrong? He didn't answer, just motioned toward the far side of the yard. Standing behind the fence, barely visible between the slats, was a man in a black jacket and baseball cap. He wasn't part of the party. He wasn't holding food. He was just watching. By the time Jonah got to the fence, the man was gone. We left early, hearts racing. As we pulled into our driveway, Jonah turned to me. You see now? He said quietly. This isn't just a bad neighbor. This is organized. Someone's got eyes on us. And it's not just us. I felt a weight drop in my chest. What do we do? He looked down at his lap, then back at the house. We prepare. For the next 2 days, Jonah barely spoke. He turned the garage into a makeshift operations center, pulled out maps, connected his laptop to a secure satellite signal, reviewed footage, ran facial scans. And then something happened. Around 3 a.m. on Sunday, the backyard camera triggered an alert. Jonah was already awake. He watched the footage in real time, and what he saw made him grab his gear. I woke to the sound of the front door opening. When I came downstairs, he was already out on the porch, night vision goggles in hand, sidearm holstered. I stepped outside, heart pounding. What's going on? There's someone in the backyard, he said calmly, and they're not just passing through. I froze. Jonah pointed to the monitor. A dark figure was crouched near the fence line, holding what looked like a small metallic device. I'm going out there, Jonah said. Alone? He nodded. Stay inside. Lock the doors. Before I could protest, he was gone, moving like a shadow through the dark, silent, focused. I watched the screen as he approached the figure, staying low. Then, without warning, the figure turned, fast, raised something. There was a flash, a sound, a pop, and Jonah dropped to one knee. That's when I screamed. I flew down the porch steps, barefoot and shaking. My heart hammered in my chest like it was trying to break free. The grass was damp beneath my feet, and the night air was thick with silence after the sound. "Jonah!" I called out, over and over until my voice cracked. There was no answer. Just the rustling of bushes and the faint buzz from our backyard sensor light. I reached the edge of the lawn when I saw him, half hidden behind the big sycamore tree near the fence. He was crouched low, one knee on the ground, one hand braced against the dirt. His sidearm was drawn but pointed low. I ran to him, dropping beside him on the ground. "Are you hurt?" I whispered, grabbing his arm. "No," he said, steady but winded. "Not hit. It was a flashbang, small one, tactical, homemade." "Flashbang?" I repeated, still trying to breathe. He looked up at me with a grim expression. "This isn't just a scare tactic. That was a warning." He stood and motioned for me to stay behind him. Then, together, we moved to where the figure had been. They were gone. Whoever it was had slipped through the hole between the back fences and vanished into the woods behind the neighborhood. Jonah picked up the metal object the intruder had left behind. It was a small, scorched canister, cooked black at the edges. I stared at it, unsure what to say. He pocketed it and walked back toward the house. I followed him inside without a word, still trying to process what had just happened. Inside, Jonah didn't panic. He didn't curse or rant. He moved like someone going through protocol. He sat at the table, cleaned the sweat from his face with a towel, then began typing furiously on his laptop. I watched him for a moment, then finally asked, "What now?" He didn't look up. "Now we escalate." By sunrise, Ryland had called back. Jonah put the phone on speaker so I could hear. "You're being targeted," Ryland said, no sugarcoating. "Someone's running recon on you. You said they deployed a flashbang?" "Yes." Ryland let out a breath. "This goes beyond neighborhood drama. You need to be ready. I'll get a team to do a sweep. But in the meantime, double lock everything and do not go anywhere alone." "Any idea who?" Jonah asked. Ryland hesitated. "There's chatter about a group, private contractors maybe, ex-military types, dishonorably discharged. They don't like soldiers who speak out or disappear with secrets." I looked at Jonah, confused. He avoided my gaze. "Secrets?" I asked. He finally met my eyes. "I didn't just serve, Mom. I led a mission that got buried. Some people didn't like how I handled it. Thought I went too far protecting civilians." Ryland spoke again. "Your name came up on a forum a few weeks ago. They called you a traitor to your brothers, said you went soft." I felt like the room was spinning. Jonah? My Jonah? Being hunted because he showed mercy? "What can we do?" I asked, trying to hold it together. "Stay alert," Ryland said. "Trust no one, and don't assume this is over." Jonah hung up and stood. "We need to warn the others. If they're watching multiple homes, this isn't just about me anymore." That afternoon, we called a meeting. Denise, Mr. Halstead, Wyatt, and a few other concerned neighbors came to our living room. Jonah didn't tell them everything, just enough to raise awareness. "There's someone targeting homes," he told them. "They're organized, quiet, and using tech that isn't off the shelf." He showed them stills from the camera footage, the black SUV, the figure in the backyard, the photo in our mailbox. "We need to stick together," he said. "No more turning a blind eye." Mr. Halstead, usually a man of few words, spoke up. "What can we do?" Jonah looked around. "We form a neighborhood watch, not the kind with clipboards and flashlights, real surveillance. We rotate shifts, keep logs, install cameras. If anyone spots something unusual, we don't wait. We alert everyone." There were nods around the room. Even Wyatt, barely 17, looked serious. Denise leaned forward. You think Dennis is still involved? Jonah shook his head. No, he was a distraction. Whoever sent that flashbang knew how to move. Dennis is sloppy. This is something else. Everyone left that evening a little quieter, a little more cautious, but united. The next few days were quiet again, unnaturally so, like the calm before a storm. Jonah kept training. He ran drills, set up new security routes, reviewed satellite feeds Ryland had provided. But the silence was deceptive. One evening, while I was folding laundry upstairs, I heard a knock at the door. 2 sharp taps, not like a neighbor, not like Amazon. Jonah froze mid-step as he passed the hallway. I followed him down. He checked the monitor. No one was there. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice. And all the screens on the security feed went black. Jonah spun around. Back up now. We ran into the kitchen as the house lights went out completely. Total darkness. Then, a crack, glass shattering. From the back window, someone was inside. The crash of glass felt like a gunshot. My legs froze, heart pounding in my ears so loud I couldn't hear anything else. Jonah moved fast, faster than I'd ever seen. He yanked open the drawer under the sink, grabbed a flashlight and his backup weapon, then pulled me down low behind the kitchen island. Don't move, he whispered, pressing the flashlight into my hand. If anything happens to me, crawl into the pantry and stay there. Don't come out unless I call for you. Jonah? But he was already on his feet, a shadow among shadows. The house was pitch black. The backup generator hadn't kicked in, which meant someone had killed the line manually. That wasn't amateur stuff. Whoever was in the house came prepared. I crouched lower as I heard the faintest creak of footsteps. Somewhere near the laundry room. Jonah moved toward the sound like he belonged in the dark. One foot silent after the other. And then, silence again. I held my breath. Flashlight gripped so tightly it hurt my fingers. Then, a grunt, a thud. Something heavy hit the ground. I almost screamed but caught myself. More noise, a scuffle, and then another crash. Then, nothing. I waited. 5 seconds, 10, 15, and just when I was about to crawl out, Jonah's voice cut through the dark. Mom, it's me, stay put. I peeked out slowly and saw his silhouette drag something across the floor. A man, unconscious, dressed in black from head to toe, gloves, boots, tactical gear. Jonah flipped the lights back on. Emergency power kicked in. I stood, heart still racing. Is he alive? Jonah said, breathless. But barely. He rolled the guy over and tore the ski mask from his face. He wasn't anyone we knew. Pale skin, bruised eye, shaved head, mid-30s maybe, a scar over his eyebrow. Jonah searched his pockets, pulled out a burner phone, a tiny earpiece, and something that made my stomach turn, a small list, names, addresses, and at the top of the list, Jonah Turner. Below it, Rebecca Turner. Below that, Wyatt Jennings, Denise Warren, Gregory Halstead. Jonah stared at the paper, expression tightening. This isn't random, he muttered. They're working a plan. What do we do now? I asked. He stood, grabbed zip ties from the drawer, and bound the man's hands behind his back. We send a message. Within an hour, Ryland arrived. He had 2 other agents with him this time. Quiet men with hard eyes and sharp suits. They took the intruder, secured the evidence, and listened closely as Jonah explained everything. This was just a probe, Ryland said grimly. They were testing your defenses, seeing how fast you respond. They knew about your backup system, knew the cameras were connected to your main grid. They've been studying you. Then they're about to get a lesson, Jonah said. The next day, he and Ryland worked together to reinforce the house. Military-grade security, power backups, and new surveillance tech I didn't understand but trusted completely. But the bigger concern? The list. Everyone on it was part of the potluck group. So Jonah called a second meeting. This time, it was quiet. Late at night. No kids, no food, just serious faces around our living room. "We're not just being watched," Jonah told them. "We're being hunted." Denise shook her head. "Why us?" "Because we stood together," Jonah said. "They want to break that, make us afraid, separate. Easier to pick off." Wyatt, who hadn't said much all night, looked up. "Then let's not break." Jonah nodded. "That's the only way we win." Over the next few days, the group worked around the clock. They set up a real neighborhood watch, shift rotations, communication protocols, emergency codes. Jonah trained them himself. He taught Mr. Halstead how to handle a baton, showed Denise how to sweep a room safely. Wyatt learned how to set up motion alerts. Everyone had a role. Everyone was involved. And for a while, it worked. No more attacks, no more messages, just silence. Until one night, Wyatt's alerts triggered, motion detected, back alley. Jonah was on his feet in seconds. This time, he wasn't alone. He, Ryland, and Halstead moved out together, while Denise stayed inside with me, monitoring the feeds. We watched the black and white camera footage like hawks. Nothing. Nothing. Then, 3 men, all dressed in black, slipping through the alley with military precision. They were coordinated, clean, methodical. "Go quiet," Ryland whispered through the earpiece. "Flank left." Jonah moved behind a row of hedges, fast and smooth. One of the intruders stopped suddenly, looked toward the camera, straight at it, and smiled. Then he raised his hand and detonated something. The screen went white. The cameras cut out. Every alarm in the house started to scream. Then came the rumble, a deep, rolling sound that made the walls tremble. Something had exploded. Not just a flashbang, not a distraction. This time, they brought real fire. And they weren't done. The blast shook every window in the house. A fiery glow lit up the night sky like lightning from the underworld. Car alarms howled. Dogs barked. Lights flipped on in every home down the block, but no one stepped outside. Everyone had been warned. Everyone had been trained, but nothing could have prepared us for this. I rushed to the window and saw it. Smoke billowing from the alleyway behind Wyatt's house. Flames licking at the fence line. It wasn't just a scare tactic anymore. They wanted blood. Jonah's voice crackled through the radio. "We're hit. Stay down. Call it in." Denise was already dialing. Wyatt's signal had gone dark. His house wasn't answering. I could barely breathe. These were kids, neighbors, families. They didn't sign up for war, but war had come anyway. Down the block, 3 figures emerged from the smoke, walking like phantoms, geared up, armed, and fearless. One of them carried something long, slung across his chest. It gleamed under the firelight. An assault rifle. Jonah, Ryland, and Mr. Halstead appeared from the opposite end, low and silent, using the hedges and trees for cover. I watched from the monitor as Jonah raised a hand and signaled for Ryland to split left. "Mom," his voice came through the house speaker, calm but serious. "Go to the safe room. Lock it. Don't come out unless I say the word." "I'm not leaving you," I shouted. "Mom, please." It wasn't a command. It was a son begging his mother. And that broke me more than the explosion. I ran to the hallway, opened the door to the tiny concrete-lined room we had built into the basement last year, and slammed it shut behind me. I huddled there, radio pressed to my ear, breath catching with every sound. Outside, gunfire erupted. Not loud and wild, controlled bursts, Jonah's training, Ryland's aim, Halstead's cover. These weren't frightened homeowners anymore. They were a unit. I could hear the radio buzzing. "1 down," Ryland said. More shots. A crash. "2 down," Halstead grunted. Then Jonah's voice, low and steady. "Last one's running. He's headed toward the lake path." I closed my eyes and prayed. I didn't care who the attackers were anymore. I just wanted this to end. I wanted my son alive. Outside, more footsteps, running. Then nothing. Silence. Then a heavy knock on the safe room door. "Password," I whispered. Jonah's voice replied, "Rabbit's got a long shadow." I opened it and threw my arms around him. He was covered in sweat, dirt, and a thin streak of blood across his forehead. But he was standing. Alive. "They're down," he said, breathing hard. "All of them." "What about Wyatt?" "He's okay. Shaken up but safe. He'd snuck out to check the noise before the blast hit. Lucky kid." I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was more than just my boy. He was a protector, a leader. And in that moment, I knew. We had survived the worst. The police arrived minutes later, followed by an FBI team led by Ryland's supervisor. The bodies were taken, the area sealed. The attackers weren't from a local gang. They were hired, paid in crypto, off-the-grid operators brought in to neutralize Jonah and anyone close to him. But they underestimated who they were dealing with. A few days later, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Ellen Thompson stepped down as president, citing health issues. A new board was elected, one that didn't carry weapons or write violations in the dark. Jonah didn't say much in the days that followed, but he smiled more, slept better, spent his afternoons on that spice rack he'd started months ago. It came out crooked, but I loved it anyway. Wyatt came by one afternoon and handed Jonah a small wooden plaque he'd carved himself. It read, "The quiet ones are built for storms." Jonah smiled, ruffled his hair, and said, "You did good, kid." The neighborhood healed slowly. Fences were rebuilt, cameras upgraded, families learned each other's names finally. People waved, helped, looked out, and the black SUVs never came back. The war didn't start with us, but we ended it, because no matter how strong the enemy was, they forgot one thing. You don't pull a gun on a man who's trained for war, especially not when he's standing between you and his home.